Hello, welcome to Gimme Empathy. It's my podcast where I talk to people about the icky stuff inside their heads. I'm your host, Scott Mercer. I'm a musician, a community radio announcer, and I do this for some reason as well. This week on the show is my friend James Fearn-Wannan. James is my gig buddy. He's the guy I go to when I want to go out and see some bands. I don't want to do it alone. And he's often up for it, and as I am, if he wants to go see bands. I'm not sure if this particular relationship is something that a lot of people have, but they definitely should, because as you grow older, you know, your regular circle can sometimes get a bit less reliable in terms of being willing to drop everything and head off to see some possibly dodgy, possibly cool bands at some dive venue. Because as people get older, they tend to take on more responsibilities. They like to stay in and stream things and chill. And sometimes after that happens, they drop babies out of them and they go take care of them. So James is a good friend to have around. But of course, he has more qualities than being a person I go to gigs with. He's a video game animator. He used to work for the mighty Sega when they still had a studio here in Brisbane. In this episode, we talk a lot about that, and we talk about James's own bedroom music recording projects, and we get into some deeper stuff at the end that we normally wouldn't talk about in a loud live music venue. So enjoy this episode, number 32 of Gimme Empathy with James Fearn-Wannan. Yeah.
Hello.
So get pretty up on it. What'd you have for breakfast, James?
Nothing.
Do you normally not eat breakfast?
Yeah, normally. I sleep in all the time. I'm very disorganized.
Sleep is your breakfast.
Sleep is my breakfast.
Yeah.
Yes.
James, how do we know each other?
We met each other through Jeremy Neal. I don't remember what year it would have been. I'm going to say 2012-ish.
Sounds about right.
'Cause I went on my own to see him perform, I don't know what you call it, just a selection of songs from his various bands and things in an acoustic setting.
Was that at Black Bear?
Yeah. Yeah, well, also I figure you must have done the same thing that night.
Yeah.
I went out to Jeremy and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, oh, I'll introduce you to people. And he sort of scans the room and sees you sitting there and he's like, this is Scott. Talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very much like that. And it's kind of remarkable because often, like, people will do that to you. And it's like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
And then you never see them again.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how we've kind of
Yeah, I don't know. It's
stuck together.
I don't remember because I'm really not very good at just, like, talking to people I don't know.
Me neither.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's enough of an overlap in our
Maybe we just
and
recognized the awkwardness of the situation that Jeremy, thanks Jeremy, I'm pretty sure you're listening, that he put us in and were able to empathize with the other.
Yeah.
To realize it was difficult. And
I would have been perfectly content to just sit on my own up the back in the dark.
And since then, I guess the main thing we do together is go to gigs.
Yes.
We're gig buddies.
We are gig buddies.
Like if and as is often the case, like you want to go to a gig, you don't necessarily want to go alone.
No.
Because like I understand, you are perfectly happy, not going to a gig as a social thing, but at the same time, there's a certain vulnerability to being at a gig alone.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
Yeah. Especially as I got older and the rest of the crowd has not.
Yeah.
Because I still go to gigs on my own, semi-regularly, and then we'll have a mild freak out after the bands are finished and the lights come on, and I try to escape as quickly as I can. And and it's nice to have another person there to buffer that a little bit. Just to be a reason to not. Because I suppose they're supposed to be social things, right? And it feels a bit like you're not playing by the rules if you don't participate in. And like I said, like I'm not going to go up to strangers and be like, oh, hey, you're also here on your own, and
let's
enjoy this together.
That is terrifying. Yeah. And how did you initially meet Jeremy?
That's kind of a weird one. We were at school together, but he was a year above. And so I don't think I ever had any interaction with him at school. It was more just when I guess, started going to gigs and he would be there and we'd sort of recognize each other. Like, oh, hey, we were at the same school. Yeah, it's like I feel like I should know him sort of better than I do because it's like we've been aware of each other for, a huge amount of time, but not really spoke to each other for most of that time.
It was really funny. And so you know Harley Young as well?
Yes.
And was that through Jeremy or did you know him separately?
No. That was I think a friend of his was dating a friend of mine for a period of time and then, that finished and those two remained friends. I think I met him, they brought him to my house for my 18th birthday or whatever. Just like, this guy's Harley.
It was really funny. Earlier this year, we were all at a gig together at Outer Space in West End.
Yeah.
And was that the first time, the four of us had all actually been in one place together?
Surely not. Maybe.
I can't remember another time when we were. And
over the course of 6 years, that was the first time.
And we all have these, I guess I know both of you through Jeremy initially, but now I have independent relationships with both you and Harley.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was a dry gig. They didn't have a license and none of us were drinking and we were just standing around and we didn't have anything to say to each other.
It was really alarming. This is what I worry about all the time is that I won't have anything to say to people.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, my worst fears are coming true and I can't liquor up to mask that.
Yeah. I just got to close that door.
Yeah, no, cool.
So James, you also make music yourself.
I dabble.
Kind of on your own in the dark in your home. When did you start making music?
Maybe when I was 15 or so. So I started playing the guitar because my younger sister started playing the guitar. And I thought, I can't have a younger sibling having a skill that I don't have. Spent the next bunch of time trying to figure out how to do it.
Like playing other people's songs?
Oh yeah, of course, initially.
Whose songs?
There's a lot of White Stripes. I was very into them at the time. Probably like that and Beatles and trying to do Cream, but failing to do Cream.
White Stripes is a pretty good starting band. I remember learning a lot of their songs early on as well, because a lot of them are simple power chords, but then his lead breaks can be quite a bit more challenging when you're ready for the next level. Yeah. But they're also just very satisfying songs to play.
Yeah, totally. Because I guess they were written to be played by one person and not the whole band, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You play it and then it sounds ballpark similar to the recording. And also, I think he used a lot of just open chords, the ones that are sort of easy on your fingers when you're learning.
Have you heard Jack White's new album?
No, I'm nervous.
But I am too, because I've heard it's his first he's done digitally.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I mean, I don't mind when most bands record digitally, but Jack White as such a confirmed analog diehard.
Yeah, and it was such a principled thing, because I think he was the person to put me onto that idea of I don't know what you call it, enforced constraints or something like that.
Yeah,
where you put yourself in a box.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the box is now. Because even, on the last couple of solo albums where he had a full band or whatever, he was still using an 8-track machine or something like that.
And mostly done live, I think.
I think so,
Very few overdubs, yeah. So when you're doing your own recording projects at home, is that a principle you try and apply? Do you put restrictions on yourself?
Anyway, I mean, there's a natural restriction of it being I'm on my own and I have limited access to various equipment or whatever. But yeah, I got myself in this weird headspace at one point where I was just whatever I do, if it was only possible after 1980, then I'd want nothing to do with it.
Oh,
so
interesting.
all the sort of fake MIDI instruments that I'd be downloading, was this based on something available in the 70s or before? All these plugins to emulate tape machines and consoles, and got deep into figuring out what the workflow was for those old things.
Did you even make your own reverb unit or something at some point?
I made a tape delay.
Tape delay, yeah.
Couple of found this thing on the internet where they were like, if you buy this particular kind of cassette machine and play with it in a certain way. Yeah. So I bought this old, it was like a cassette player that journalists would use, I think. So it's like quite sturdy, high quality, but it's portable.
How do you even, like, I've never even thought how they originally made delay happen. I just stomped the box for my guitar. How does tape delay even work?
It works because from the little gap between the record head and the play head on the cassette thing. So the sound goes in, gets recorded on the record head, travels along the tape for a few millimeters, which, takes a small amount of time, and then it comes out of the play head. And so, it goes in, comes out a fraction of a second later, then you pipe it back in, and then that's how you get the repeats.
And so you adjust like how much tape is between for like delay time?
Usually it's the speed of the tape.
Right.
You slow the machine down. Because I think there are some, like, I don't know, but the Echoplex or whatever, I think the heads actually move. Don't quote me on that. But, because I think in the old days you just have like an extra 2-track machine or something, and you just speed it up and slow it down to adjust the timing. But that was very exciting, learning firstly how it worked, and then managing to like pull it off myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that something you've used in recording?
Yeah, it's been good. Eventually, it's stupid. I spend a lot of money on like gear and stuff, and then never finish anything or share anything. So I've got this like maybe not quite as serious as what you've got in your house here, but like a room full of just guitars and bits and pieces. But yeah, I bought a Tascam 4-track thing. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have a fully analog workflow, and so I had my Tascam thing and my little tape delay thing, and I hijacked the spring reverb on the back of an amplifier to just get normal non-delay reverb. It was very satisfying and exciting, but yeah, obviously haven't produced anything worth sharing with the world.
Have you ever finished a whole song, let's say, that's mixed and everything?
Yeah, but then I never feel like it's, well, no one ever thinks anything's finished, right? So I have that sort of sensation. It's like, oh, those lyrics are a bit terrible. One day I'll write some better ones, and then I'll record it again, and then So I've got like folders full of files that you probably could call finished, but I refuse to call finished.
And myself and Jeremy and Harley have been harassing you to release some of this, because we've heard snippets, and I objectively think it sounds very good.
Thank you. That's kind of you to say.
Well, are you satisfied just starting these projects and tinkering and never really sharing them? Is that, or do you want to get them out there and play gigs? It's
a mix. I'd like to, but at this point, like, because I've been doing it for years and years without the expectation of ever sharing anything, it's just become a hobby that I enjoy pursuing for its own sake. And I do like that notion that I think there's sort of a purity in that. It's like I'm not trying to impress anybody except myself. And if I want to just dive into the technical aspects of it that no one wants to think about, get caught up in building tape delays or, figuring out how to stack plugins in a certain way to create a certain thing, then I can indulge that without worrying about the outcome.
Do you ever go back and listen to stuff that's maybe mostly finished?
Yeah, I do. And I'm always surprised. Like, there are things that I had been doing in the old days which I've stopped doing, which are still good. Like, I have on my I use my memos thing on my phone to record little ideas, and there's so many. And I go back because I've maintained the same kind of, like, across several generations of phones, just kind of copying and copying.
Yeah.
So there's like 7 or 8 years or something worth of these little recordings, and from time to time I go back and I'm just like, what? Like, what's that? How did I do that? What chord is that? These sort of crazy sounds that I have just forgotten or stopped using.
Yeah, I've got the same thing, like folders and folders of stuff from old phones. And it's funny, like as phone technology improves, like the sound quality of the memos improves.
Yeah.
And I have the same thing of like forgetting how this little riff worked. So now I've started, if it's at all complicated, after playing the riff, I'll just yell into the phone like a C chord, but at the 6th fret and with this hammer-on thing, da-da-da.
That is a good idea. There was a period of time where I would just kind of play through the notes just like ding, 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 like so I could at least hear them and work it out backwards later.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I should do that. There was a period of time where I tuned a guitar down, like every string down to like B instead of E or something like that. So I've got a whole bunch of recordings doing like open chords with that weird tuning.
Cool.
And I mean, in principle, that's cool. But now I just can't for the life of me figure out, what those chords are. So they're just lost to time now.
The theme for this podcast came from one of those half-forgotten phone recordings, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I remember when, I could probably look it up, but it was years ago. I just had that little guitar thing in mind. And then last year when I needed a theme because I wanted a theme for the podcast, and I was looking back through my things.
Yeah.
And there was a thing to use that I would never use in any other music project.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like any of my bands.
Yeah.
This'll do.
Yeah, great. So was it already, did you get the recording and then sort of redo a version of it? Or was it exactly as it was?
Yeah, no, the original sounded garbage. Yeah, and I added like a drum. Being a technical half analog kind of tinkerer,
Yes.
you might like this. I sampled the drum beat for the Gimme Empathy theme from my old Casiotone keyboard from the 80s.
Great. I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, but it's one of those ones where you tell it to play in a style like samba rhythm or whatever, and then you can increase the tempo, but you can't actually, it's not like a drum machine. You can't tell it what beats to play.
Yeah.
But so what I did, I just had it play just whatever beat, and then recorded that, and then chopped up the beats and put it together how I wanted it to be.
Excellent. That's really good.
Yeah, I've been meaning to sample the whole thing at some point because it's built as a children's toy in the 80s. It's not going to last forever.
Yeah, it's amazing how well because I have a little Casiotone. It doesn't have the drum machine in it, though. I was very jealous when I discovered that some of them do. I think it was my grandmother's. It must have been from the 80s. And it's like 3 octaves worth or something like that. And it's still kicking. It still works. The sounds are a bit cheesy. So you have to work at them a bit to find a place for them.
None of them sound like what they have printed on, like electric guitar. This sounds like a synthesizer. Piano. This sounds like a synthesizer.
I want to know if, when they were new, did they sound like guitars to people? Because you know how, I remember when, let's say Star Wars Episode 1 came out, and I was like, well, they've done it. They've cracked CG. It's perfect. and you look at it now, and it doesn't look like anything.
Yeah.
Was it the same for sound, maybe? They had this sort of weird, plinky electronic things. Yep, that sounds like a piano.
Well, guitars did sound different in the 80s because once they started with digital workstations and that, I think they moved away from that warm amplified sound that we fetishize so much these days. And I think they thought that was the future.
Yeah.
And there's some bands like late era Split Enz stuff. There's stuff there. I don't know if it's Neil Finn or Eddie Rayner playing, it's guitar or keys. It's really on the borderline. Yeah. So maybe it did. The one tone that is really cool on the Casiotone is the pipe organ.
I think I might have the same set of sounds.
It just sounds huge and awesome.
Yeah. I've been, it was just in a box for years. I sort of didn't touch it for a long time. Just pulled it out recently. I've been enjoying the just regular organ sound because it's not so huge and full that you can't put other things next to it. Kind of leaves more space for. That was a nice discovery.
Is that like the soft one, the blue kind of thing?
I guess so. Yeah, I think
maybe it's a jazz organ.
Oh, you have more sounds than I do. I think
I've got 16. I think.
I think I might have just 8.
I'll have to sample my whole keyboard and just send it to you at one point.
Yeah.
What other creative outlets do you have apart from music?
My job is in video games. I do animation for video games. And so I don't so much do that at home, but I do enjoy just trying to make the rest of the more technical aspects of like trying to program my own small indie type games. Yeah, that's a terrible explanation of what it is.
Well, how did you get into animation?
Well, I was always into drawing as a child, as I'm sure everybody in this field is, and my dad was a computer programmer when he was younger, and so somewhere down the line he had suggested that you could get some book about how to make computer games, and then I could draw some pictures, he could do some programming, we could try making something. And then I started, reading those books too and trying to teach myself how to program things. So through the course of high school, I was constantly trying to make little games. And so my intention was, after I finished school, to go off and do like computer science or something like that. But then my dad quite wisely pointed out that, if I have those art skills that because I've been sort of doing the art classes and the maths classes, if I had those art skills, it would be more, I guess, emotionally fulfilling to pursue that instead of the programming thing. And so at the very last minute, I sort of changed my uni preferences to be sort of art-based stuff. And then I went to do a animation degree, which was really just, learn how to use a computer to make art. Yeah, so after I graduated there, I had that feeling, which I'm sure all graduates have, where you think, the world owes you a job. And it's like, I have a degree, I'm 100% qualified to do any of these things. Then eventually realized that's not true. And then I met a guy at a party who was I think he was somebody's cousin's boyfriend. It was really but he was an animator. And I started talking to him about his job. And animation's one of those weird ones that I don't think anyone starts out learning wanting to be like a character animator, because everyone wants to, be a concept artist and do all the sort of the nice paintings or whatever, or a character artist and create the characters and things like that. Like animation always seemed like this secondary thing. But I don't know, I don't remember what he was saying necessarily, but it suddenly sounded very interesting and like something I could handle. And so then I went off and spent the next few months sort of developing those specific skills. Eventually just cold called a bunch of game studios, and somebody got back to me eventually.
Are there many game studios in Brisbane?
There are starting to be. There were a lot of them opened in I'm going to say the 90s. I think because $1 was really bad, and so it was very cheap for American companies to open studios here. So there were a lot of sort of satellite studios for bigger companies in Brisbane specific. Like Brisbane was the city in Australia for game dev. Oh. And then when the GFC happened, all of them shut down. And then it's starting to pick up again now, I think. A lot of it, because we just ended up with a lot of really skilled people in Brisbane who didn't have jobs, and so a lot of people started opening, smaller indie companies, and so I think probably the overall number of people doing it here is still less, but it feels like there are places to go and people doing things now, and it's comforting. Yeah, I think I like that, because I was working at Sega when the GFC happened. I think that was the last big company to fold. So we just every few months an email will go around being like, oh, such and such closed down. Oh, are we going to be next?
Was Sega the first studio you worked at?
It was. It wasn't Sega at the time. It was Creative Assembly.
Oh, so they were their own thing and they got bought by Sega.
I think they were already owned by Sega, but they were just called something else. It was like a subsidiary or something like that.
Okay.
So they did those Total War games. I never worked on any of them, but my friends did. And somewhere down the line, I'm not sure exactly why, but they changed it from Creative Assembly Australia to Sega Studios Australia. And
was that exciting at all? Because
oh yeah,
I know even at that time Sega were out of the console game.
Yeah,
but, when we were growing up, they were huge.
Yeah, it's still a big. Even though I don't know if they'd really done anything worthwhile for ages, but just to come into work and see that Sega logo on the door, it was very exciting.
Were there sliding doors, and when they opened, did it go Sega?
There should have been. When they did that rebrand, they went and sort of put up murals of Sonic and Knuckles and all that around the place. It was nice. It felt very sort of gamey and kept us in the spirit.
So did you enjoy working at Sega?
I did. It was not without its frustrations, as I'm sure any workplace is, but I felt the right balance of creative freedom and the people were really nice. I'm still quite good friends with a lot of the people I worked with there. I was there for 5 years or something like that. I managed to work on a pretty broad variety of things in that time.
What games did you work on?
The first one was called Stormrise. It was an attempt at real-time strategy game on consoles, which had a lot of good ideas, but in the end, I think didn't work out that well. But, learning experience.
So were you doing like animations for all the little dudes like running across the screen kind of thing?
Yeah, I was just trying to remember, because I was new, and so I was given sort of the lackey animation tasks.
What are the lucky animation tasks when you're new at a video game studio? Because I doubt most people will be familiar with that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think my first thing was animating a helicopter or something. It was like a helicopter that also had wings or something. So it's basically, make these blades spin around, and the starting and stopping and turning animations just to kind of, there's not a lot of moving parts, but just try and get some sense of weight out of this thing. Yeah, I might need to clarify what animation is, because I'll tell people in taxis or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, you draw the pictures?" I'm like, no. Yeah, it's just like I get given a character or an object that's already completely set up, and then sort of move around like a puppet. So it's just the movements that I do, not the actual artwork. It was probably a good entry point, because it's just if you can make this essentially box look like it's floating in the way that a helicopter would float.
So if that's an entry-level, grunt-level animator job, what is a prestigious animator job? What do you work your way up to doing?
Well, it'd be the character animation, I suppose. Any sort of showcase animations that you'd get, like in the video game anyway, like, in like a fatality in Mortal Kombat or something, like the sort of thing where like the camera cuts and like, yeah, look, I'm doing this crazy cool thing. Because they're usually the more tricky ones to do, and they get all the attention of the camera. So I'd say that's probably but I mean, there's so much of both involved for everybody.
So what did you work up to doing by the end of your time at Sega?
Well, by the time I finished, I think there were only two animators left, because we started with a team of 5 or 6 or something like that, and there were sort of rounds of cuts. So yeah, by the end it was just a couple of us. So it was a Mickey Mouse game, and so yeah, me and this other guy just sort of split all the work down the middle, and that was good.
You got to animate Mickey Mouse?
I did.
What was the game?
It was a remake of Castle of Illusion, which is an old Mega Drive game.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. It was like a 2D platformer, but it was in 3D, like 3D graphics, but like 2D gameplay. But then from time to time, it would go into 3D gameplay.
So when you're doing a remake of a game, do you go back and have to play the original a lot so you keep the spirit of how things moved?
Not so much us. I mean, I did play through it a couple of times and watched a lot of YouTube playthroughs. The designers, the people who were sort of building the mechanics and the levels and things, like they definitely played through it heaps and heaps and heaps. Because we had to be careful, because as the art lead at the time was saying, you want to remake the feeling that you remember, not the game itself. Yeah. Because a lot of the times you'll go to play those old 90s games and they're very clunky and they don't really work that well. So, yeah, we didn't want to sort of get too familiar with the old ones and then just end up remaking that, frame by frame. Yeah, it's a fine line. And also because it was Disney, they have their own, they're very kind of strict about how their properties are portrayed. So I have a feeling they wouldn't be all that happy if we just copied what they were doing in the old days. So did you have access to like original, design documents from when the original Castle of Illusion came out? I don't think so. Because I don't know what, that would have been like early 90s, 91 or something like that. I guess so. I don't know how much of that stuff was documented, yeah. I'm just saying, because like when they do movies, like the new Star Wars movies, they've got these huge Lucasfilm archives they go back to. They've got like, they can go talk to Rick McCallum or whoever it was who did the puppets and stuff and like get original specifications for the Millennium Falcon. And but I get in with video games for so long, it's been an ephemeral kind of thing. And even the people making these games probably never thought this information would be useful again. No. Yeah, it is ephemeral. That's always sort of bothered me, because more so when you're doing console things. Like at a certain point, people will stop using Xbox 360s and they'll stop working, and then what do? The game just sort of disappears. It's not like a painting or something you can it's a physical thing, or you can print out a copy of something, or it's just because it's so tied into its hardware. If that hardware goes away, then it's just gone.
So the games industry in Australia was pretty much crippled by the GFC, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people bailed for Canada or the UK or something like that. Yeah, because suddenly, cause like I said, they opened the studios here because it was cheap, and then suddenly our dollar was stronger than the US, and it was just very expensive. And I think for the most part, we've been sort of given kind of the lesser projects, I guess. And so we weren't necessarily churning out or set up to churn out sort of original IP in the way that if you're going to put that sort of money into a studio, you'd want. That's my guess, anyway. Yeah. So they all kind of one by one would close down, and we'd try to salvage as many people as we could. Yeah, until we were shut down as well.
Did you think of going overseas?
Yeah, it crossed my mind. They were asking, like when they did the first round of layoffs, they would sort of asking like, would you be happy to go overseas or whatever? And I think I was just too timid. Like I really should have. I do regret a bit not kind of traveling, because I'm at that age now. I'm 30 now, so I think it'd be just a little bit too hard to get those sorts of working visas that people get. But yeah, I don't know. I was worried that I'd go to a new country and wouldn't be able to make new friends, and all this sort of stupid stuff that doesn't actually happen in real life. Of course I'd meet some people, it'd be fine. But
there's kind of like something appealing about that, though, about moving to a country where you know absolutely no one, because you could totally reinvent yourself with no repercussions.
Yeah.
Like you could absolutely pretend to be like this gregarious Australian, just have no barriers, no filters, and that's just like, this is Canadian me now.
Yeah.
And as far as everyone knows, I'm always like this, and everyone, and whether people like you or hate you, it's an experiment that you could do.
I wonder, because there was a period of time at Sega, like I was there for a few months on a contract, and then I went off and got another job in Melbourne for a little period of time. And at that point I had that thought, like I could start dressing differently, I could start, I could adjust my behavior, I could be, I could turn into Russell Brand.
Yeah.
But
you've got the hair, it's curly.
Well, yeah.
Kind of. If you grew it.
I found some old photos of myself where I'm very obviously trying to do that.
Oh, really?
Like, what a time. But then, I don't know how much you can really just change your personality like that.
I'm sure it would be a lot of effort.
Yeah. I'd like to try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to be a kind of rowdy, noisy guy.
When did you move to Melbourne? Was that after Sega closed?
No. It was after that Stormrise project finished.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because I was just like a graduate hire, just there for like 9 months or something. And so I went off for like 3 or 4 months between, like while they kind of started up on the next one. Yeah, so luckily they did take me back when I finished up there. It was quite naive of me, actually, but they sort of were saying, oh yeah, when we start the new one, we'll get you back. But people say that all the time, and it doesn't really happen. It did this time. But yeah, I was sort of operating on this assumption, like, I'll just go away for a little while, and then they said they'll get me back, and I'll hold them to that.
And was that the first time you lived outside of Brisbane?
No. I spent a fair chunk of my childhood in Melbourne. My dad's family's from Melbourne, so we lived down there for 7 years or something. But that was the first time, like, living on my own outside anywhere. Possibly the only time I've done that. So yeah, I went down with this idea, like I'd find some apartment in the middle of the city, and I'd become this new outgoing guy, and I'd go down to bars and make all sorts of new friends or whatever. But then the only apartment I could find was, in some industrial zone, like 2 trains out of the city or whatever. And so I just became even more of a hermit than I was before.
Were you in your long-term relationship at that time?
I was.
And so was that hard, moving away for months?
Yeah, I guess so. I think we possibly thought it was going to be more challenging than it was, because I was only gone for like 3 months or something like that. But she came down to visit like twice in that time, which, looking back on it, is a lot of travel in a short amount of time. But I mean, we were all, I don't know, we were like 20 or something, so we weren't living together or anything like that.
A lot of that relationship was pretty long distance anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, not that distance.
No. 'Cause, yeah, she moved to Toowoomba for a number of years.
Hmm.
But that was still like, that's not that far away.
Yeah.
Still kind of managed to see each other on weekends.
And that was for work, for her work?
Yeah.
So when Sega did fold and you didn't go overseas, what did you do?
I kind of just bummed around the house for a number of months. The payout was pretty good. Cause I think the nice thing is that the company itself still existed, so they weren't so broke that they couldn't like
give you a severance package.
pay.
Right, okay.
So I was very, I didn't handle it in the most mature way. Just like, I have all this money now. I don't have to find a job for a while. I'll just kick around. But yeah, after 4 or 5 months of that, start to just feel useless. And so, and so I ended up at a place that they do a lot of like ads and kind of work for hire cartoon type things. Yeah, let's do that Polly Pocket show.
There's a show. I remember Polly Pockets from the 90s.
Yeah.
All those things are like little clamshell things that opened up and there was a little scene and little figurines inside.
They were quite good. I remember, I mean, I had the Mighty Max ones. For boys.
Yeah, sure.
But my sisters had the Polly Pocket ones.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed them. I didn't even know they were still around.
Me neither.
so I turned up and like, we're making a show about these things. And like, oh, okay. So yeah, that was interesting. It was the first time I'd done, because like when you do like game animation, it's always like just little loops of somebody running or somebody jumping, something like that, just individual pieces of actions. But this was like, low level acting. It's like here's a shot, here's a scene, like these people are talking to each other.
But are the skills like technically in the software you use, are they more or less transferable?
Oh yeah. It's more the approach that's different. But at the same time, I think it was quite helpful because I feel like I managed to bring a lot of that stuff back to games. Sort of had a bit more flavor to what I was doing. Because like when you are just doing like a loop or something, it tends to get quite generic. It's like it's a soldier and he's running. But yeah, after that experience, I was sort of more inclined to add little kind of flourishes. Yeah, that's probably right. I was going to say kinks, but that's possibly
depending on the game you make.
Yeah, a very modern game.
Yeah. So was that just a contract, the Polly Pocket show?
Yeah, that was just a contract. Ended up being there for about a year, I think. That was nice. That was interesting.
And what did you do after that?
After that, I was working at QUT. They're doing it was a dinosaur sort of exhibition thing where like they had these huge screens and they'd sort of create a virtual dinosaur zoo, Jurassic Park kind of situation.
Cool.
And that was really interesting because like the goal there was to be scientifically accurate. And so we'd have a fellow come in from the museum and sort of talk to us about dinosaur anatomy and biomechanics and sort of show us videos of animals that he deemed to be most similar. It's like, so it's a combination of, it was always cassowaries and elephants and things like that.
So what dinosaurs did you animate?
There were a couple of the classics, like there was a Tyrannosaurus and a Stegosaurus, and Triceratops, main ones.
Cool.
But I think we're trying to have like a 50-50 split of sort of classic dinosaurs and Australian dinosaurs. So there was like an Australian raptor that I think the guy, our sort of museum fellow, I think he discovered it, or he was responsible for writing up I don't know what you call it, the paper, giving it a name. So that was very exciting. I'm blanking on the names of them, but there's one that is like a raptor, one that's like a brachiosaurus kind of long neck thing. Yeah, and that was really interesting. And that was also good because it was the first time I'd done something that felt like honest and worthwhile. It wasn't like a commercial product. It was like educational. Yeah, and it was there for the good of society and not just to make money for somebody. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Because that used a lot of, because it was an interactive thing, so it used like game technology and software and things like that. But it was like a fixed installation.
Do you push a button and you make him move in like a set pattern, or could you like control a T-Rex?
Well, the intention was that, you'd go up and you sort of tap on the glass or whatever, and then the dinosaur would look at you and walk over. And so it was all built to do that. It didn't kind of quite end up that way. It was a complicated project and it was a pretty small team. So, we did what we could. Yeah, but like in testing, I used my programming skills to build a little test scene with the Xbox controller, and you just sort of run around as the dinosaurs in the field. That was neat. I think we eventually used that as a sort of like because it opened on the school holidays and had lots of activities for kids to come in and watch talks about dinosaurs and do colouring in, and off the side we had a little room with the computers and the game pads, and so if you want to control the dinosaur, come into this one, and so that was cool.
Did you ever go in the holidays to watch people using your work?
I don't know if I did. I should have.
Or did you ever get like a feedback on how it went?
Yeah, well, I heard from, because I think like that was just a contract thing as well, so I kind of did the job and then went off to do something else. And yeah, I think like when I would sort of catch up with those people from time to time, they're saying it was well received. I went with my mother a couple of times because she was an English teacher, an English second language teacher, and would take her students on excursions sometimes and brought them to see the dinosaur exhibition, and she was always telling me how much the students enjoyed the dinosaurs. So yeah, it appealed to all age groups.
So have you found in general as an animator in Brisbane there's been enough contract work, even if it's, these like Polly Pocket dinosaurs, not strictly within the games realm. Has there been enough contract work to kind of keep you above water?
So yeah, I've been surprised that I've managed to maintain sort of such a steady career. Because I don't know, I think I might be in a different position to other people just because I've been doing it as long as I have, and I've got contacts and I have experience. Because I feel like there must be just enough work to go around for me. So I'd hate to think what you'd do if you were just starting out now. It's been odd because it's always like something will just appear when I need it to. Just a contract that wasn't there before, but now that I need a new contract, one's appeared. So I don't know how long I should be relying on that kind of luck to survive. Yeah. So I've made a go of it somehow. Like in the game thing specifically, now that's moved into sort of smaller indie things, they tend to want people who can do like all of the jobs, or like, just a general artist who can, make the characters, animate the characters. Whereas because I came up in that sort of bigger studio thing, like I'm quite specialized at this point. Like I can animate, but I wouldn't want to tell anybody they could do anything else.
Well, is that something though that you'd be ambitious to branch out in if possible? Because like if you only got into animation, because at the time that was the more stable prospect.
Yeah.
So do you still do you want to make games for yourself?
I'd love to. Yeah, like I say, it's just sort of one of my home time hobbies to knock something together like that. And so I feel like given enough, if I put in the effort, probably do it. And I'd like to somewhere down the line, because I have some friends who've put games out themselves, and they're great. It's just a matter of kind of feeling confident enough to put the time aside and dig into it. Because the friends who've done it would get to a point where they eventually quit their jobs to focus on making. I don't know if I'm bold enough to commit to something like that at this point. But
where are you working now?
I'm at it's a mobile games company, Gameloft. So I think it's a French company. They've got a lot of studios all over the place. But yeah, it's a very new type of. I mean, it's still games, but like the way mobile games are made now is very different to what I was used to. Like that thing where it's they're free, and so you have to try and figure out how to make the money elsewhere. So there's groups of people there for who work in the analytics area of it, which I'd never encountered before. It was always like, we've made a game, buy the game, please.
Is that a contract thing, or is that full?
No, that's a full-time spot.
One of the trends in games is actually making games that last longer with new content that comes out. So people are more on a subscription model, whether it's an actual regular subscription or they just keep paying for DLC.
Yeah.
Does that actually get you more stability in the industry as someone employed? Because you could be working on the same game for years, coming up with new animations or whatever.
I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that one. This is still kind of quite new for me. Because there is definitely a sense that the game, they're alive. They release them and then, like you say, they continue to work on them. Because I have friends who work in similar companies who have been literally on the same game for 5 years or something like that, and it's been out for 5 years.
Yeah.
still plugging away at it. Yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. I guess if it's successful enough when it comes out.
Can you talk about the game you're working on?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
No. Yeah, it's not been announced.
All right. The contract work you've had in the last few years, has it all been overlapping, or have there been periods where you've just been kind of free floating a bit?
Yeah, there's been a lot of sort of downtime. Actually, I think this last one, I organized this current job before I finished my last contract. It's the first time in my life I managed to do that.
But there was, so in that case, there was still a period of a few months, right?
Yes.
Between when
Yeah.
you finished your last contract and the new one was starting.
Yeah.
How long was that period?
Maybe 3 months. It was quite a while. It was a really odd sensation because normally, I'd finish a job and then I'd feel this, stress that I need to, if not actively look for a job, then, work on something to help. But because I'd already found a job, there was nothing that needed to be done. So I just sort of find myself like sitting on the couch worrying that I wasn't worrying.
Right.
Yeah.
So you still felt some sense of stress, but there was no longer something to actually pin it onto?
Yeah. It's like, because I guess maybe I'd started to associate those downtime periods with feeling stressful. And it's like, okay, downtime is back.
Yeah.
Let's resume that stress, but then there's no reason for it. And it was a really odd sensation.
Well, how do you deal with your downtime periods, like in terms of like a daily routine and keeping occupied? What did you, in the recent one most specifically, like what did you do day to day?
There was an odd one, because like a whole bunch of stuff sort of happened at the same, like I ended the relationship and sort of found myself unemployed, and I think I'd recently moved house or whatever. So just like all the important stuff in life had just sort of changed all of a sudden, and I was just in this kind of like weird state of shock, I think. And is that odd thing where like I basically would just wasted all that time. Like while I was doing it, I was just like lying on the couch or I was watching a movie or something. It's like I should go do something. Like I have all this time and I've got all this equipment and hobbies I should be pursuing, but I just I think like what I figured was that time stopped being valuable, if you know what I mean. Because like, if you come home from your job or whatever and you've got a few hours in the evening to do stuff, and so you want to use those wisely. But when there's nothing, it's like, you wake up and, if you don't do it today, then you can do it tomorrow. And then, you just keep pushing it back and back. So you can spend like a week getting ready to do some minor little thing. Yeah, it was a weird one.
I do get that on a smaller level. Mm-hmm. If it's a quieter weekend, I might lie in bed when I wake up and be on my phone for way too long.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to go to work that morning. I might not have to get out of bed till midday.
And do you feel uncomfortable about
That's
doing
the
that?
worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing. I hate myself for it. And even though I do things to alleviate that, like I put my phone on charge in the bathroom, so I physically have to get up.
Okay.
But even then, sometimes I'll grab the phone and then just flop back into bed.
Yeah.
Or I'll set myself these arbitrary limits, like, okay, I'll only stay on Reddit till it's 8 o'clock, or now it's 8:30. Well.
Yeah.
And then
time disappears when Reddit's open.
I know, and then I'll get up and do my morning stuff, and it's like, if this was a weekday, like I would be at morning tea by now. I would have got all this stuff done.
Yeah.
And you feel terrible.
Yeah. It was like because I'm already something of a night owl, but then like left unchecked, I would find my days just sort of like slipping out of sync with, until eventually I sort of, I'd be in like normal human hours again, but then it would slide and then I'd be going to bed at, 7 in the morning. And
So do you have any techniques to try and avoid that?
no, just indulge them. Yeah. I think I've got limited self-control in that, because I would just be like lying on the couch thinking like I'm going to be really annoyed at myself, in a couple of months when I'm working again, and I, think about how much time I've wasted. Like, you can feel yourself wasting that time, and like all you need to do is just get up and go do something. But I wouldn't.
Sometimes like the hardest thing is just getting out of bed or like out of your chair. And once you're up, it's so much easier. That first step is just the hardest.
Yeah. Because I get like, if I get into, like a groove doing something, like I'll stay up, all night sort of trying to get some little feature sort of programmed into something, whatever. I, get completely enthralled in what I'm doing. But yeah, for whatever reason, just getting started.
Yeah.
And very annoying.
After you have like a really productive period like that, you'll think back and it's like, oh, that was so easy. That was so good. I'm going to do that all the time.
Yeah.
No, you're not. Because then you think, oh, I was so productive. I need a reward now.
Yeah.
I'll just blob and watch TV for a couple of hours. And then you're right back in the, the pit.
Although I have found, like, if I had a really good day, got a lot done, I'd be excited to do it again the next day. And I think it would sustain me until I got to a point where, like, something didn't work out. Like, I'd hit a problem that I couldn't easily solve. And then I'd sort of fall back into my lazy thing. It was like, oh, that thing I was working on, that was too hard. I don't want to get up and... Yeah, if I was doing something really cool, I'd just be thinking about it. Like, specifically, though, if I was working or whatever and I was forced away from it and I had to sort of be at work for 8 hours or whatever, but then my brain would be on, that thing I was doing last night and what I'd like to do, that night to carry on from that. Yeah, so it's quite inconsistent. But then you get yourself into one of those funks and it's really hard to break out of it.
Was going through a breakup as well, did that just kind of exacerbate the whole thing in this last period?
I think so. Because like I was saying, the stress of having to find a job was gone. But yeah, because like normally the thinking would be I have to worry about looking for work and I have to kind of, keep her happy or, maintain a relationship or whatever. And then suddenly it's like I don't have to worry about work. I don't have to worry about other people. It's just this kind of void now. Yeah, so I think it was bad timing. So like I was just left to my own thoughts way too much.
What kind of thoughts?
I don't know, just maybe like fear of the unknown, I suppose, because it was like 10 years. Because we were together, but not like living together for most of that time. And so I was just living on my own for years and years and years. And so at first I was like, I've lived alone before. I know how to handle this. It'll be okay. But then I started to realize that even if I was living on my own, I'd still, get like phone calls and texts. I'd still be in communication. But then suddenly like that stopped. And so it's just on my own, not talking to anybody sort of face to face, not talking to anybody over, phone or messenger or whatever. I'm not going to work. I'm not seeing people at work. So it's just so much time on my own. And, you get those sort of thoughts and feelings in the immediate aftermath. It's like, was that the right thing to do? Like,
did you end the relationship?
It was quite mutual. Mm-hmm. I think we both because we were just having a chat one day and kind of realized that our long-term sort of plans or whatever weren't like lining up with each other anymore. Mm-hmm. I think I put that down to it being a long relationship that was mostly not like long distance, but just sort of like
separate.
Yeah,
like you'd grown apart.
I think so. Like we'd sort of figured out how to live on our own in sort of separate ways, and then tried to put that together, and then just kind of didn't fit.
And at the end, you'd moved in together?
Yeah. Sort of maybe 8 months or a year before the end, we were like, like now's a good time to move in. Because I think like we didn't have much in the way of mutual friends or mutual interests or hobbies or things like that. It's just kind of like what we had was just that we'd known each other for a long time.
And when you did move in together, so it didn't work as well as you'd hoped?
Yeah, I guess so. Because I think, I'll put a lot of it down to my kind of laziness. Like, because when I was living alone in the past, like my apartment was a nightmare mess, and I would never like cook for myself. I'd just eat takeout all the time, and like I kind of got into a groove of living like that. And she was very much, keep the place clean, cook all the stuff, get everything prepared, do it all properly, and I think those two sort of ways of doing things rubbed up against each other a bit. Yeah, and even if it was like her perceiving me as sort of being slack and me being like, well, you just don't need to do those things, and yeah, I don't know. So I think that started to get stressful after a while.
So whether the breakup is I guess mutual or you initiate it, so long as you've had a say in it, I guess there's always going to be that doubt afterwards whether you've done the right thing.
Yeah. I guess it's like any major thing that you do, right? because like I hadn't, like, that was my sort of first major relationship sort of thing, and I was, you have those thoughts where, like, well, maybe that's supposed to be like that. Maybe kind of, even if it felt dysfunctional, maybe that is just what relationships are supposed to be like. I don't really know. Just dealing with a change of that magnitude, I think. Like, I don't know what's on the other side. So now I'm finding out. Is
that scary or exciting?
And I was about to say it started out exciting and then got scary. But I think it was both exciting and scary before, and it's still exciting and scary now. I don't know, like, what single people do. What do you do?
Yeah, I think when you think about it and think about, like, the possibilities, they can seem exciting. But when you actually go through it, it's more scary.
Yeah.
It feels scarier.
Yeah. Because I think, like, you play this little sort of fantasy version of yourself in your head.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah, no, I'll really flourish, and I'll go around, I'll meet all sorts of people who do all sorts of new things. But it's like, I'm the same person. It's the same personality. Like, I wasn't doing that before. I'm unlikely to do that now.
Yeah, and arguably, like, I don't know if this is a universal thing, but I've found I went through a breakup last year with the long-term relationship. I reverted to the person I was before the relationship. I feel like I've rewound.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of development. I thought I did. I got better at things and felt more confident when I was in the relationship. And I feel like that's really unwound.
Oh, no. Okay.
Do you feel that too?
Maybe. Because I certainly found myself getting extremely nostalgic for, like, I stopped listening to whatever music I was listening to, and I go back and survive on, Interpol and Block Party or whatever those.
Oh, like the music you were into before.
Yeah. So, and I think that might be a bit of a kind of backwards retreat into, whatever state I was in beforehand. I haven't noticed that sort of behavioral thing just yet. How long do you think that did it take for that to kick in? Like, straight away?
No, and not straight away. Or maybe it did, and I only noticed slowly. Yeah. Because, you, like you're saying, you have these visions of what your life is going to be like when you're single again, and then that doesn't happen because you're not the same person you were in a relationship. Like, you're not part of a team anymore.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how much strength you derived from being in a team, even if it's not in terms of doing things together.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get, like, maybe just sort of knowing that you're valued, like having that sort of, like, you can rely on somebody valuing you.
Yeah.
And, like, right now, I think I have that feeling. It's like, maybe that's, like, I'm not going to find that again. And like, am I valuable?
And you realize, like, how fragile your self-validation skills can be, no matter what you're doing. Yeah. And if you're doing things that you might have thought in the past, oh, if I do this, then that'll mean I've won. That'll mean I'm doing everything I want to do. Yeah. But then you realize your validation engine relies on more than one kind of fuel. Yeah. It's like in a strategy game. You've got it's like StarCraft. You've got your Vespene gas, which is your self-validation. Sure. But you also need the crystal things. What are they?
I don't know.
The minerals or whatever.
Sure.
You also need minerals. Yeah. And you need both of them to build your Zergling army to rush the Terrans. And if you run out of one, you can't feed the refinery on just the one, I guess.
No.
I don't know if that analogy makes sense. But
no, I think I get what you're saying. Because I have this weird combination of arrogance and horrible insecurity. Oh, yeah. Just like, it must be the case for everybody, right? Where you go through those moments where you're just like, I'm amazing, but am I really amazing? And I think, have somebody else kind of be like, you are amazing, just to kind of give that one side more of a kind of boost over the other.
Even if you don't always believe them.
No.
Like, even if you know to some extent, like, not that they're not telling you the truth, but just that part of that is influenced by the fact that they like you. Yeah, yeah. It's
just like they don't want to upset you or whatever if they're just sort of being nice.
Yeah,
or there's something in that,
Even if they might actually think, you are amazing, even if
It's like a distorted perception.
Yeah, but that perception is still valuable.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I guess I just didn't realize how big of a factor that was.
Yeah. I'd say if I had any advice, don't leave it too long.
Yeah.
Don't let your Vespine gas reserves run out. Search for more minerals.
I'll dig.
Send out the little drone.
The drones, yeah. Just it's a time thing, presumably, right? Yeah. I know, like I'm still partially like living in that fantasy world of myself. Like, eventually it'll settle down and then everything will be fine.
Don't let the fantasy become a memory of a fantasy.
No.
Like, make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's one of those like really hazy fantasies where it's like it's just more of an idea than it is like anything concrete to chase or strive towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to fulfill fantasies, but like it can be valuable and productive and healthy to pursue them.
Yeah. But I just need to solidify, I think, what that fantasy is.
Sure.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Well, thanks for this joint therapy session, James.
Thank you.
I think we've both got a lot out of it.
Yeah. It's good to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Kind of feel weird like bringing them up under normal circumstances. You don't want to sort of burden people with your...
Yeah. Especially when we mostly see each other at gigs. And it's like, how about this band? Did you see that other thing?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like the avenue when you have to shout over music. And
No. And also it could be like a male thing, right?
Oh,
Not
totally.
wanting to, yeah.
We're garbage communicators.
I know. And it's like you get all the sort of indications that people are basically fine. Like everybody wants to, everyone has feelings they want to talk about. And just no one wants to, like, it's like the times you sort of have let slip something's going on. Everybody's very receptive, very nice about it. But there's still that, like you don't want to sort of burden somebody with your own sort of issues.
Yeah.
It just feels impolite more than it feels like.
It's not because there's conversations about the aspect of toxic masculinity that doesn't let men share emotions for fear of being weak. But I don't know if that's even part of it for everyone. I think part of it is not wanting to burden other people.
Yeah,
it's out of a sometimes misplaced sense of consideration for others. Yeah.
Because I don't feel like some of my male friends are kind of masculine types. Yeah, it's like I don't feel at any point that anybody would sort of tell me to stop or make fun of me for some thought or feeling I had.
Especially if like they have stuff that they're going through that they're more open to share.
Yeah.
You feel like, they're going through all this thing. They don't want to hear about my thing, which you might think is less important.
Yeah, and they're like universal experiences, right? It's like even if it's not kind of a fresh or raw thing or whatever, they can still empathize, or you can still empathize with what someone else is saying. And they're your friends. You want to kind of help them out where you can. Yeah. Thanks for giving me a venue for that.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Just one correction to make on this episode. I said that I think Rick McCallum did the original puppets for Star Wars. Rick McCallum was the producer of the Star Wars special editions from 1997 and then the prequel trilogy. I may have been thinking of Rick Baker, who was a makeup artist on the original Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, working under makeup supervisor Stuart Freeborn. I'm so sure that you're thanking me right now for getting that right. I know so many of you out there were just screaming. You're thinking of, what's his name? You're thinking of Rick Baker. It's not Rick McCallum. Rick McCallum had nothing to do with the creature design. Here you are. This is my gift to you. You can all sleep sound tonight because I have saved the day again. Gimme empathy at podcast@gmail.com. Do that thing. Check out past episodes. There's like over 30 now, which is nuts. Go listen to them all in any order. It's designed to not be a sequential puzzle necessarily. You can listen to them in any order. It's like that. It's like that season 4 of Arrested Development that didn't quite work. Until next week, stay developed. Bye-bye.